Nothing will stop me in my quest to find the hidden architectural treasures of the region. So when I heard of a most unusual house in the Norfolk Broads, with no access by road, I decided to take a boat instead.
You can actually get there by foot, but this is a lot more fun, even in the middle of the winter. The man that owns this boat is Fraser, and he also owns the little gem I'm coming to see today.
It's called the Dutch Tutch, and it was one of the earliest holiday homes here on the Broads. But before becoming a house, it was, for many years, something quite different. There's a bit of a clue in its shape. Any ideas?
This very strange little house started life in Great Yarmouth. It had to be dismantled and brought here on a barge. And when they reassembled it, they built two parts, the main house and a little shed. Now, can you guess what it was originally? Well, I'm going to tell you. It was a helter-skelter.
Here it is on the Britannia Pier in Great Yarmouth, sometime before 1914. In those heady days, it was called the Mat and was one of the star attractions. Fraser spends weekends here and also rents it out as a holiday home. He's collected a whole range of postcards and magazines showing the building down the years. On this postcard from 1914, the stairs are still on the outside of the structure.
Fraser, when did it cease to be a helter-skelter?
Well, we understand in 1909, there's lots of rumours about what actually happened to the house, to the helter-skelter. I've heard two recently. One was that the pier was burnt down by the suffragettes.
Oh.
But that actually was in 1914. But there was a fire in 1909, and so we think that's probably when the helter-skelter was taken down and reconstructed here. We have a picture of it on the riverside in 1913, when it looks as though there was only one other bungalow on the riverside at that time.
Now, what does it feel like to have your house as part of an international model collection?
Well, it's rather strange, isn't it? It's that model was made by a company that makes little models of well-known houses. It was discovered by my father-in-law, and he went and bought it for us. And,
discovered in a moment of absolute shock, and some mild horror, I would have thought as well.
Yes. And also, we've noticed recently that the model only has 10 sides, and the house has 12.
So no attention to detail. The house is a very well-known landmark in the area, but not everybody knows that at one time it rang to the sounds of happy men, women and children spinning round the outside on a front doormat.
From the Norfolk Broads, we head into Norwich to the Royal Arcade. Now, at first glance, this may just look like a row of shops, boasting some miracles of engineering, perhaps, but hardly an architectural treasure. But if you raise your eyes and have a really good look, you'll see that this is a real gem.
The architect was Norfolk-based George Skipper, who designed it in the Art Nouveau style in 1899. But it beats me how an architect in Norfolk in that time would know about a continental movement in architecture, one known for Tiffany vases from America and tube station entrances in Paris. It was described as a fragment of the Arabian Nights here in the heart of Norwich.
I refuse to be distracted by the enticing window displays. I'm here to admire and enjoy the building itself. Just a short walk from the Royal Arcade is Skipper's flagship building. It's the original headquarters of the insurance company Norwich Union and opened for business in 1904.
The outside is pretty grand, but the inside is truly extraordinary. And if you wonder why I'm carrying a bunch of spring onions, I'll tell you shortly.
It was extremely unusual for an insurance company to have its headquarters outside London, so George Skipper was told to make it as impressive as possible.
No prizes for guessing why this is called the Marble Hall. There are 15 different kinds of marble. 1, 2, 3.
From the dark green Verdi Antico to the Belgian blue, all of this marble was intended for Westminster Cathedral, but the church had run short of money, and canon law stated that the building could not be consecrated if it had any debts. George Skipper heard about it and rushed down to the docks to have a look.
He had to have it, but the cost of the consignment was £6,000, twice the entire budget for the interior of the building. It wasn't going to be easy to convince the board of Norwich Union to spend that sort of money. But Skipper told them that if they did use the marble, they would never have to redecorate ever again, and the architect got his marble.
Altogether, there are 40 columns, all with different patterns. This one is known as Cipollino, Italian for little onion.
We call it a spring onion, and if you cut it vertically, you get a pattern exactly the same as the marble.
Now, this is one of my favourite features. It may look like an elaborate church font, but in fact, it's one of the earliest examples of an air conditioning system, and it also doubles as a heater.
George Skipper loved technology. Heated and purified air was introduced into the building through this well and distributed around by the pendant over. But the architect didn't want unsightly radiators in front of his very expensive marble. So the stale air was extracted through these very discreet grills at the bottom of the columns. And in the summer months, the Norwich Union employees were the coolest in town.
Up the fabulous stairs, marble of course, to the boardroom. And I feel particularly privileged to be here because I'm following in the footsteps of none other than Telly Savalas. Recognise the setting? Oh yes, this building was used as a location in that legendary series, Tales of the Unexpected.
Cherie, you're one of Norwich Union's archivists, and we're now in the boardroom, which I believe is a particular favourite of yours.
Absolutely, this is a great favourite of mine. When you look around and see all of the wonderful Egyptian references, the signs of the zodiac are up on the ceiling there, and of course the Egyptians would barely get out of bed in the morning, well, the wealthy ones anyway, without, consulting with their astrologers.
Now, the Sphinxes, I recognise that face, I'm sure I do. Who is it?
It's Queen Alexandra, but please don't tell the royal family.
Bit risque, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Seeing her stripped to the waist like that. Now, looking above you, I can see all these frescoes on the walls.
Yes.
All the women have got the same
Aren't
face,
they lovely?
haven't they?
Aren't they lovely? Yes, and I've seen a photograph of her. It was quite unsettling. Her name is Rose, and she was married to the artist who is George Murray. And he, in true artistic fashion, he could only afford one model, and he ended up marrying her. And here she is, Rose.
When the Duke of Edinburgh visited this building a few years ago, in his usual blunt manner, he commented, "Do your policy holders know that you've got all of this?" Today, financial institutions would never build a building of this extravagance, which would seemingly squander their shareholders' money. But back in the day of George Skipper, the motto seemed to be, "If you've got it, flaunt it."
Sadly, for most of today's employees, they work in the office next door in slightly less spectacular surroundings. In my search for our next architectural treasure, you find me in the wilds of the North Norfolk countryside.
This story is about a Victorian gentleman, Sir Alfred Drew, who quite simply can be described as a philanthropist. He built this marvellous flint and brick wall all the way around his 2,000-acre estate, when he didn't really have to do it. A fence or a hedge would have done. But he caused it to be built to keep his staff busy during the flat season, so that he could employ them and pay them. What a nice man.
A Victorian guidebook to this area put it like this: nature could hardly stage a more delightful scene. I've come to the village of Glanford, which lies in the Glaven Valley, and was entirely rebuilt by Sir Alfred Drew when he inherited his estate in 1882.
Sir Alfred built these delightful cottages for his workforce. Most landowners were happy for their men to live in hovels, but not Sir Alfred. And he left his own personal mark on each and every gable, the Maltese cross.
On inheriting the estate at the age of 35, Sir Alfred became known as a generous host, if a little eccentric.
Sir Alfred served the very best wine, but never touched a drop himself. He used to say to his footman, "Don't give the Colonel any more port, and for goodness sake, the vicar's been at the sherry again."
Before we get to the little gem of a building I've really come to see, it's worth stopping off at the village church, a hidden treasure in its own right. Sir Alfred was extremely close to his mother, Adela Monckton Jodrell, and after her death he spent 7 years restoring the church as a memorial to her.
Sir Alfred used to occupy this pew with its elaborately carved end every Sunday. The carving depicts a dog resting its head on a coffin, an image inspired by Sir Edward Landseer's famous picture, The Shepherd's Chief Mourner. But the dog was in fact his mother's, called Nimble. And during the service, the congregation would see Sir Alfred's hand go down gently to stroke the dog's head.
Typical of the man, Sir Alfred insisted that no monument be erected to him, but instead asked that a plaque be put up, commemorating all of those who worked on the church restoration, all 19 of the carpenters, bricklayers and stonemasons. Each one gets a mention.
His generosity knew no bounds. He instigated one of the first examples of free school transport, sending a covered wagon to pick up the children. Then, once a week, he sent a hamper of vegetables to the Norfolk and Norwich hospital.
But his sense of duty didn't make him a dull man. Typical of the Victorians, he loved collecting teapots of all shapes and sizes and china birds, but in particular, he loved collecting beautiful and exotic shells.
For years, they were kept in boxes at Bayfield Hall, and then he finally built a building for himself, the Norwich Shell Museum.
Once it was finished in 1915, Sir Alfred, together with his sisters, spent many a happy hour arranging his substantial collection in the specially designed cabinets. He'd collected them over a period of 60 years, so he had a few. Over the years, people have also donated their own shells, fossils and random bits and pieces, including a piece of Pompeii and a large sugar bowl used by Queen Elizabeth I. The current Lord of the Manor of Glanford is an American who bought the title, and he's never been here, but he clearly has some of the generosity of Sir Alfred. He's paid for it to have a new coat of paint.
When Sir Alfred died in 1929, 200 villagers joined his 2.5-mile-long funeral cortege. And in a typically humble manner, his headstone simply bore his initials, A.J. So that's the story of Sir Alfred Jodrell, gentleman, shell collector, and philanthropist.
The North Norfolk coast was discovered by the upper classes in the 1880s, and Cromer became the place to go for some bracing sea air. The area round Cromer soon found itself on the map as well, when it was nicknamed Poppyland and became the subject of a popular book of the time. Second homes sprang up all over the place, and here in the quiet village of Overstrand is a fascinating example.
I'm not promising you a beautiful house. In fact, the architect himself described it as a bit of a muddle, but it's a very good example of his early work. The man in question is Sir Edwin Lutyens, one of the most important British architects of the 20th century.
This is the Plaisance, a house commissioned in the 1890s by Lord and Lady Battersea. Lutyens' problem was that he wasn't allowed to start from scratch. Lord Battersea instead insisted that he convert and extend 2 small houses, which originally stood here.
He also had to put up with constant interference from his clients.
Lord Battersea was a politician and a man of property who loved the idea of summers in Norfolk. He became something of a celebrity in these parts due to his great good looks. Apparently, he cut a very dashing figure as he emerged all brinily radiant from the sea. His wife was a member of the rich banking family, the Rothschilds, and she was rather less keen on leaving the pleasures of London behind.
Plaisance, as it's called, an Old English word meaning pleasant place, has many delightful Lutyens touches, including this watchtower, which Lady Battersea hated.
The circular bakehouse with its conical roof, which she wasn't very keen on, and an extraordinary cloister.
Which, guess what, Lady Battersea detested. Poor old Lutyens. He was only 27 and a very shy man, and he had nightmare clients. In fact, he had designed it to overcome a problem they'd encountered. 2 regular visitors were Edward, the Prince of Wales, the son of Queen Victoria, and his wife, Princess Alexandra. And they liked to come here to take afternoon tea in the sunshine. They were a very popular couple, and when word got out locally that they were here, people would go up to Cromer Golf Course, up on the cliff up there, take a picnic and some binoculars and spy on the royal couple.
An inspired Lutyens put the cloister here, in front of the terrace, to block their view. Eventually, Lady Battersea grew fond of it when she discovered how suitable it was for fêtes and bazaars. The interior still retains much of the arts and crafts style popular at the time. Lutyens incorporated some of the many gifts the Batterseas had received. These doors of oak, ebony and mother of pearl were a gift from the Sultan of Morocco.
I often wonder how practical an architect he was in the early part of his career, because to dust that ledge over there, a maid had to crawl along on her hands and knees.
Let's hope she didn't suffer from vertigo.
and outside a balcony that was specially designed not to catch the sun, as a tan was definitely not fashionable. Now, Lutyens wanted to make this wall higher for very good safety reasons, but Lady Battersea wasn't having any of it and pushed the bricks over. She didn't want this wall to spoil her view.
One of this building's biggest fans is local man Maurice Hollows, and he's also extremely fond of another Lutyens creation.
Maurice, I understand that Lutyens designed a chapel in the area.
Yes, he designed the Methodist Church in Overstrand, mainly because Lord Battersea's head gardener, who he had brought from his home at Aston Clinton, was talking to Lord Battersea one day, and Lord Battersea asked him, "Is there anything that you have missed since I came here?" He said, "Yes." He said, "I've missed my Methodist chapel. There is not one in the village." And immediately Lord Battersea said that he would build one. And as far as I understand, it's the only nonconformist chapel in the United Kingdom that Lutyens actually designed. A lot of visitors mistake it as a lifeboat house, even though it's in the middle of the village, because he apparently based his design on the lifeboat houses of that time.
In 1907, Lord Battersea died unexpectedly. His wife lived on to 1935. As they had no children, the house was sold and it became a Christian holiday centre, which it is today. Sir Edwin Lutyens went on to great things. He designed the Cenotaph in Whitehall, the British Embassy in Washington, New Delhi in India, and even a doll's house for Queen Mary at Windsor. And I wonder if he ever gave a thought to this lovely little house here in Poppyland.